If you guys want to watch the easiest tutorial on how to color correct in Final Cut Pro 10, don't watch any other video because we're getting started right now. How's it going, guys? My name is not Greg, and today we're going to learn how to color grade and color correct in Final Cut Pro 10. This video is intended for beginners, so if you're a little more advanced, maybe you'll learn something new, so I encourage you to stick around because we're going to get started. First, what you want to do is open up Final Cut Pro. Once it's open, so I already have all of my files on here in my project. So the first thing you want to do is go into your window, workspaces, and then go into colors and effects. What I recommend here is to click on the little box, and you want to have, instead of RGB overlay, you want to have Luma, and instead of histogram, you want to have waveform. And then in the View tab, you click here and you just choose 2. And so you'll have your vector scope here and then the waveforms here. So the values here are measured in IRE. IRE is basically the level of luminance. So 0 IRE will be basically 0 detail in the shadows, and 100 IRE will be really just clipping in the highlights. So there's no detail in the highlights or shadows. In Final Cut Pro 10, you have a bunch of different ways to grade or correct. You have color board, you have also color wheels and color curves. So I like to use the color wheels and not the board because I think it's the most useful to me and I grade the quickest that way. So what we're going to do is go here where it says no corrections, we're going to add color wheels. And we're going to expand this window a little bit. Basically, the master is going to affect the whole image. The shadows, highlights, and midtones are quite self-explanatory. What I usually do when I first start in the clip, I tend to look at the waveform. So here we can see there's some detail in the highlights. Nothing is really clipping. So in these wheels, you will see these dials on the right, the left, and in the middle. The ones on the right are going to change the luminance, so dark and light. The right side is going to change the saturation, and then in here is going to change the hue. So if you want more of a red, blue, green image, you can change it here. If the highlights are too low, I'm going to bring them up, but here they are already on the top. You can also, you can see when I bring it up all the way here, they're going to start to get flat, and so they're going to be no detail. So I'm going to put this right underneath the 100 mark, and then what you want to do is bring the shadows down. So these shadows, you want to bring them down until the lowest point hits 0, and you can see there's already a slight difference in contrast. And you can even, if you want to get more contrast, you can bring up the highlights just a tad, and the midtones you can bring them down if you want like really more contrast basically. For skin tones, this is also important. By the way, I'm going to make a video on how to get perfect skin tones in Final Cut Pro 10, so don't worry, that one's coming soon. So midtones, we're just going to drag them down a little bit. Don't want it too much. Actually, the highlights, I'm going to bring them down too, so it's not over the 100 mark. And in the master, we're going to also boost the saturation, and you can see that we're getting more saturation. So I'm going to bring it, you can bring it quite a bit with Nikon Z6 footage. This is the footage that I'm using is from my Nikon Z6. So I brought it up to around here, and you can see in the vector scope, so the vector scope is basically showing you how much color there is in the image. So here you have the reds, you have magenta, blue, cyan, green, and yellow. So the colors that are on the far end here, if these waves will go all the way to the edge here, that means it's really saturated. You can see when I pull saturation down to 0, it's in the center. And when I bring it up, it expands closer to the edge. So you want to have a relatively balanced image, but when this is in a flat profile, you can boost the saturation quite a bit. What we can do is check the RGB parade. And here we can go into, we can change here RGB parade, and now we will see the individual red, green, and blue values. As we can see, there is a huge dominance in blue compared to green and red. So what we can do also, if you think there's too much blue, you can see that it's in the highlights. So up here we can see, yeah, there is quite a bit of blue. So we're going to take this highlights wheel, and we're going, if I bring it more into blue, you'll see it'll start clipping. You'll see how it starts clipping. So what we want to do is bring this down to get a level image. You want to bring this more towards the orange, red, or yellow even, like so, and maybe like that. So we can see that this image compared to before is so much nicer. What you can do is you can even add a second color wheels. This is what I do when I'm doing a color grade and not a color correction. And of course you can do the typical having the highlights in the orange. Here we don't want to add too much, but we can add in the shadows, we can add that teal look. So like so. And then in the highlights, we want to add just a bit, add like a bit more like red, like so. And to get a more cinematic image, you can boost the shadows a teensy bit. So we're going to actually go back here to the Luma tab and see how we're bringing up the shadows. We're going to bring those up and bring the midtones down, like maybe a little bit like that. And here you can already see that the image is more faded because we gave it that more cinematic look. Maybe if you want a more cinematic look, you don't want it as saturated, you can take the saturation down a bit. But all in all, this is what we do as a regular color correction and grade using just the natural colors from the camera. Next up, we can actually look at this image, for example. We can see that it's more compressed, there's less highlights, so we can go here, go into color wheels, and we can take the master, bring the highlights up until the highest point touches the 100 mark, and the shadows will bring them down. And you can see the difference, it just pops the image a lot more. And we can now add also the saturation. And then we're going to look, as always, not RGB overlay, RGB parade. There's a lot of blue in the highlights. So in the highlights, we're going to take out a bit of blue and make it a lot warmer in the sense you can see how this will balance the image out a lot more, like so. And then in the shadows, there's also a lot of blue, so we're going to subtract. I'm going to subtract that a little bit, like so. And the midtones, we don't really need to touch. Also here you can change the temperature of the image. If you want, you can make it green, blue or yellow. We're going to just try and balance this image out a bit, like so. And again, we can then add our color wheels, a second one, where we can then take the highlights, bring those up into the orange, and bring the shadows down to a nice teal. And then we can make that cinematic look just by boosting the shadows slightly, like that, and then bringing the midtones down a bit more. If you look at that image, it has that sort of vintage vibe, if you will, and I think it looks really nice. But this was just a quick look on how to make your videos look a tad more cinematic and how to color grade your Nikon Z6 footage. So I hope this video helped you guys out a little bit because I have never known how to color grade up until this point, and I think this is the easiest way to do it, at least in Final Cut Pro 10. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your feedback. Also, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe, click the little bell so you don't miss a thing. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.